evening, everyone, and welcome this evening to the Open Door show from Property CEO. You might notice there's a little difference when we started the show this evening. There seems to be three of us. We'll talk to you about that in a minute. But obviously, I'm here with Mr. Ian Child. Do you want to say hello?
Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to the show. Good to see you all.
And we will get our friend Rory O'Mara. Rory, do you want to say hello and good evening?
Good evening, folks. Nice to be here.
Very polite. So my name's Richard Clapson. If you don't know, because it's at the bottom of the screen, you could have worked it out by now. And we're here from Property CEO. Now, if you haven't been here before, what have you let yourself in for? Well, tell me, first of all, hands up if you're new. This is the first time you've been on the show. Give us a hands up, give us a wave. Yeah, there's a few. Okay. Well, you could have done something a lot better this evening than spent it with us. But, you know, there's no point going anywhere now. You're with us, so you can't have any regrets. You've got to stay for the duration. So what's it about? Well, what you've let yourself in for is about 45 minutes of non-stop positivity. So we don't have any negativity in here. It's all about being super positive and all set around the theme of property and property development. Isn't that right, Mr. Child?
It most certainly is. Richie and I run a company called propertyCEO. Basically, our job is to train people how to become successful, small-scale property developers. Lots of amazing opportunities out there right now, particularly for people getting into development for the first time. So we want to help people find out more about those opportunities and see if development might be a good fit.
That's right. So global pandemic, recession, big deep hole, whatever it is we've got to climb out of. But hey, things are going to get better. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So we've got to look towards that. But of course, it just doesn't happen. The success is only out there for those that seek it out and make it happen for themselves. As always, we're going to be serving up a bit of advice, a bit of predictions. We've obviously got a guest this evening. There's absolutely no secret of who that is because he's already here. And of course, above all, we're going to have a bit of fun doing it. It is a question show. So obviously, you don't put any questions in the chat box and we don't really have much of a show. And the three of us would just be sat looking at you all evening. So that's what we're going to do. So who's on this evening? Let's have a look. There's a lot of you on. You've all turned up to listen to Rory, or is it just you actually turned up to listen to us? I don't know. Well, let's pretend it is Rory. So Hitan's on. Hitan's just joined us. Hello, Hitan. George is on. Ranjit's on. Ranjit from Property Investor News. Do you know Ranjit from Property Investor News, Rory?
I do indeed, yes. Yeah, I've known Ranjit for many years.
Is it a good magazine?
It's an excellent magazine.
There we are. Ranjit likes a free plug, so we do that for him. So there you go, Ranjit. A double plug. So that's all good. Tony's on. Matthew's on. Hello, Matthew. Good evening to you. Dan's on. Anthony's on. Sue's on. Hello, Sue. Teresa, Raj, Andy, Tanya, Yvonne, Craig. Damien's on. Hello, Damien. Vicky's on. Michael's on. Jim's on. Hello, Jim. I haven't spoken to you for some time. Paul's on. Bob's on. It goes on. It goes on. It goes on. I wish I could actually mention all of the names. I really can't. Hello, Rory, says Ranjit. We're on for you guys as well. Rory's great too, says Tanya. Oh, she's on for us. Tanya's on for us as well, Rory. That's good. Paul says a guest. Way, Paul says a guest.
Paul's been waiting weeks for a guest, so he's made his day.
The only thing I'd say, Paul, it's not a very good guest, but it's the best we could get at short notice. So anyway, Paul, at least we've got a guest, so you're happy. Good evening, says Michael. Good evening, gents, and good evening, Rory, says Dan. So it's quite an interesting bunch we've got on tonight. So look, it's a little bit different because normally we bring the guests on, but the problem is what Rory told me, and Rory's a good friend of mine. Rory told me he's great at technology, won't be a problem, guys. Yeah, it'll all work smoothly. So we got him on here, and then we've had a hell of a problem. Rory was sharing his screen, and there was all sorts of stuff on there which is inappropriate. And then we tried to make sure he could turn his camera off and on. It didn't work. We dismissed him. We brought him back on. And he said to me, I'm normally pretty good at technology. And we said, well, the evidence is showing otherwise. So that's why he's on with us. But we didn't want to let him go and not get him back. So anyway, for those that don't know, Rory O'Mara, he runs a company called Close Bridging Finance. You can see that's on the screen behind him. He's got his phone number and everything. So give him some hassle after this. I've known Rory for quite a few years now. Had the great pleasure of Rory and I nearly doing some development deals together. I think it would have been great fun if we did. But various things happened and we didn't. Nothing to do with technology, by the way. He's a bit of a petrol head, likes Formula One, so he can be on here. He's pretty straight talking. So actually, if you ask some questions this evening and you don't like the answer, it's just tough because Rory does give you no BS, which you know this show's about anyway. And he will be fairly blunt, but the answers and the information he gives you will be pretty sound. So that's Rory. That's his build up. So Rory, do you want to say good evening to everyone?
Good evening, folks, and it's an honor to be a guest. Yes, we had some fun with technology, but we got here in the end.
Yeah,
Thank you, Richie.
we
So,
did, didn't we?
What can I tell
Introduce
you?
yourself, Rory. Tell people a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So quick intro. Let's do this quite quickly so it gives you a bit of a heads up. So I got involved in property about 15 years ago. And my background to that, I get bored really easily. So I've worked in lots of different types of businesses. I built an IT consultancy, which I sold. I worked in the city for a long time. But my real passion is helping people. And particularly when it comes to the money bit of this sort of jigsaw, I got involved about 2006. And of those who were around buying property then, amazingly, because I didn't think you could do it, but you could buy houses for no money down. And I did a bit of research and went, blimey, you can actually buy houses for no money down. This was when there was a lender called Mortgage Express. You could get what you call a daylight bridge or a closed bridge. So what I look for is very simple. I look for problems. And that was a problem at the time. You couldn't find the money. There were very few bridging companies around then. So we worked with a couple of the education companies who were teaching people how to buy no money down. And that's what we did. And closed bridging finance was born. And we were incredibly busy around that time. And then eventually, like everything in life, things stop. The no money down, the daylight bridges stop. So we went from lending money for, say, an hour or 2 hours to the big brave world of lending money for maybe up to a year. So we had to put on our big boy pants and learn how to do it properly. And that's what we've been doing ever since, lending our own funds and also broking. So what I'm good at doing is come to me with a challenge and I'll find a way to solve the problem. What I don't do is feed you a load of old BS. Often people will come to me and say, oh, I need a bridging loan. And I had a client, actually, he's working with me now, and we went through his project, this is about 3 weeks ago. And actually, it's very simple. He said, I need a bridge because the vendor's gonna, he's gonna pull the plug. We said, well, will you do any work on the property? He said, no. I said, okay, you don't need a bridging loan. Actually, you just need to carry on with the buy-to-let mortgage that you've applied for. And what I would do is I'd go back to the vendor and just offer him an incentive to keep the deal alive. Offer him maybe £500 a month for each month it goes over. It'll go over no more than 2 months. Anyway, 12 hours later, he came back. He said the vendor's over the moon. He doesn't want to lose the sale. In this climate, it'll take another 12, 13 weeks to find a new buyer. And I said, and you don't need a bridging loan. And he went, that is refreshing. And that's how I operate. I will tell you what I think is absolutely correct, as opposed to trying to sell you something that's inappropriate. So I'm really about long-term relationships and trying to find, the legal ways to be able to basically use the security that you've got or equity. And so we can look at, when we're looking at development, what's that whole stack, the capital stack? Who's doing the debt bit? Who's doing the equity bit? And how do you make it work? And so you can rinse and repeat. And that's pretty much what I'm about.
Good stuff. Well, there's a good introduction. So, I mean, a guy, I think, if you're into development or you're thinking of getting development, you need his contacts in your arsenal and deal with him. So, Rory, you ready for a few questions? There's a few questions already come in. We're far off with those, and then we'll see what else comes in as we go. Are you ready, sat for this?
Yeah, fire away, Richie, and I will do my best.
Okay. I'm going to give you the first one. This is from Will. Good evening, Will. Will says, so first of all, actually, Teresa says that's so refreshing to hear Rory. What, as opposed to us, Teresa? Thanks very much. Anyway, Will's question is, what's Rory's view on when the residential market will recover after the inevitable drop? Here we go. What's your predictions, Rory?
I mean, I never like to make predictions because you probably could go wrong. I wouldn't. Well, the theory is there may be a drop. I'm intrigued with the increased prices as a result of the stamp duty holiday, and maybe there is a little bit of extra fat in there as a result of people keen to buy. But I think you may have raised this last week, Richie, correct me if I'm wrong, the 18-year property cycle. And I do keep an eye on how that works. So if you go back to last January, we had finished, we finished the last crash 2008 to 2012. That was your 4-year dip. Then we were getting into the first phase of growth, which is the first 7 years, 2012 to 2019. 2019 to 2020, in theory, that midterm dip. Now, sprinkle a bit of Brexit. Now you've got to sprinkle a bit of COVID on there as well. The theory is we haven't had the second 7-year growth. Now, you could argue, well, that won't happen. But I have never been so busy. Money's incredibly cheap. And the thing I think that you need to factor in is there may be a bit of a drop, but if you look at the auction houses, so I was speaking with a friend of mine the other day, he was telling me about an auction house in Birmingham, 23,000 people registered for that auction. I had a property that I looked at, I don't know, a friend of mine may even be on this webinar tonight. We looked at buying a place at auction in Southampton 2-3 weeks ago. 90K was the guide. I said bid 100. The GDV we had at 230 to 240. How much do you think it sold at in the room? So starting at 90, after we were going to spend 40 odd thousand, all the works, etc., we reckon it was worth 230, 240, 3-bed semi-detached house in Southampton. I said bid 100, walk away.
All right, so okay, so actually the audience are coming in here. So Tanya says 220, Harvey says 210.
If my memory's right, 230.
Oh, guys, 10 grand more, you'd have won a prize. Never mind.
Oh, what? Crazy. So the market's nuts. So I'm not seeing now the evidence. We are due hyperinflation. You know, if you look at what the benchmark is for where we need inflation to be at around 2%, and it was what, 0.3? I think it doubled to 0.6 lately. You've got to go through lots of multiples to get to where we're going to go. So you're looking at two types of people, the rich and the not so rich. What do the rich get? In times of inflation, you have to be in assets. And those assets are real estate, equities, mind you, the market's a bit toppy, commodities, which are crazy right now, commodity prices, bonds, and more recently, crypto.
Yep.
So I would see that, you know, that's how the rich preserve their wealth. They invest. So I can't see massive drops, and money is incredibly cheap. In our lifetime, gents, we've never ever seen money this cheap.
No, and I've been around a couple of years. Okay,
Yeah.
That's Will's question answered. Thank you, Will. Hopefully that's given you a bit of food for thought. Ian, have we got another question for Rory?
Oh, we have. We've got one here from Paul. Good evening, Paul, who asks, how much experience do I need to have to get funding on a development? I'm new to development, but have some buy-to-lets, and I also intend to get myself educated before I start. That's Paul's question. What do you think, Rory?
Hello, Paul. So how can I answer this? Because there are many different answers. I have a particular lender that I'm working with who will fund 100% joint venture development finance. I'll just give you the bullet points, keep it simple because I don't want to take up too much of the time on the question. Right now, you know, the margin on GDV has to be 27% before finance cost. Total cost for land and build, 2.5 million. Bear with me, I know that may change and go to a bigger number soon. A little bird gave me a whisper literally an hour ago, said, we may up this. Here's the catch. You have to be an experienced developer. And I don't mean someone who's done a couple of refurbs. You know, you must have built, it's mid-market housing, in and out in 15 months. So you're looking at probably 3-bed houses or decent size, decent quality flats that you'd be able to sell. So how do you get into the game, Paul? What I would probably do, actually, through Ian and Richie and the guys at propertyCEO, you probably need to set up a business where you are a key part of that business, but you need people who've got that track record and experience so that you're able to evidence to the lender that I've got a great team and the team knows what they're doing. That's that product set. The other one would be what I call traditional development finance. So let's just use a guide. Let's say we can get funding of around, say, 50 to 60% on GDV. The loose numbers, because everything is case by case. 100% of the development in stages in arrears, for build that is. Then the balance will go towards the purchase, typically around, say, 50%. So you've got to bring maybe 50% of the buy price and some of that, you know, spade ready money to get going. You're keeping all the profit on this deal. You're just paying for the cost of the debt. the first example I gave, it's a joint venture. You're going to pay for the money that's drawn down, which is akin to bridging, and half the profit will go as well. It's not for everyone, but it's perfect for leverage. The second traditional funding route, have the right team. I've got certainly one or two funders who would be open to looking at that, would be less strict. So there's scope. Thirdly, I have another solution, which is a combination of, here's the capital stack, Paul. That capital stack is made up of debt, i.e. the money that you're borrowing, and the equity. It is possible to go raise equity using the crowd, so like crowdfunding. And I've got a team that I work with that will do that. Now, you'd have to put some skin in the game. And again, you need a good team, i.e. working with the guys at propertyCEO. How do you put a team together? Because we know what we're doing. And I would say if you're a newbie or it's your first deal, sometimes you've got to be prepared to give up some of that profit, maybe in one or two deals. Once you're on to maybe a third or fourth deal, you relax that a bit, but you're able to prove that actually you can build a team and you know what you're doing.
I think we often say if you can take 50% of a deal rather than have no deal at all, then that's definitely worth doing. And it is about building that team and building that credibility. It's about being the CEO of a property company. So nice little pitch for us there, Rory. We'll have to give you a couple of quid afterwards. But no, seriously,
Thanks very much, Richie. Yeah. Well, you told me I've got the script. It's all scripted.
Yeah. Well, everyone knows how we operate. They know how we operate.
Yeah, there's no winging it here, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
Your question.
So should I pick something up here? First of all, there's a comment here from Mark. Mark says, hi, Rory. I asked the question about the 18-year property cycle last week. So good to hear your views. Thumbs up, says Mark. So well done, Rory. Okay. Ahmed says, what's Rory's view on the new 95% mortgage and its effect on the property prices in the short and long term? The 95% mortgage. What's your views on that? Where do you think that's going to affect the property market?
Hello, Ahmed. Oh, well, this is being recorded and it's live. I'm not a fan of any form of state interjection. With the state, are prices being manipulated if you're offering 95% mortgages? Now, my expertise is specialist finance, not the resi side. So I've not read the specifics of how those contracts work. But when you're looking at things like Help to Buy, for example, what happened immediately when those products hit the market? If you're a developer, it was happy days. No more discounts, no negotiation. The government's providing that sort of Mez stack, or there's a vehicle that's being created that goes, you only need to put five grand down. So let's say you're buying a place for 300, you could probably find 15,000, fine. But what happens further down the road, I think if you use Help to Buy as an example, again, I don't know the specifics, but at 5 years on, someone's got to pay. So I'm not a big fan of if our prices, I don't mean prices being manipulated, but if you make it too easy, is there a cost further on, 3, 4, 5 years down the line? It's perfect if you're a developer though. You don't have to give anything away because it's easy to get, it's easy for someone, be buying a place, say for 200 or 300, you can find 10 or 15K, probably through family, friends. So yeah, perfect for developers.
Ahmed, hope that answers your question. What's next, Ian?
Got one here from Samuel, who asks, what happens if a project overruns and the commercial loan needs to be repaid before the units are sold? Is it easy to extend development loans? I guess something that's happened quite a lot in the COVID world.
Yeah, so I think if you set COVID to one side, just look at the normal environment within which you would work. You would have a schedule for works and a schedule for costs, and you using, let's just take a good old-fashioned Gantt chart to map out all of the work, all of the dependencies. You know that a build, let's take the 100% joint venture development finance. The objective of that is mid-market housing in and out in 15 months. So obviously, I appreciate each build is, you look at it on its own merits. But if I went back to Richie and said, you take on average, you should be in and out within 15 months. Now, the exception is, I had someone contact me recently and said, oh, I want some of that, Rory, that's great. I'm going to build 2 houses worth about 4 million quid each. Yeah, that's not mid-market housing. You may build it quickly, but you may not find the buyer because that's got to be a very you know, it's a very restricted market. So you should be, providing you're clear on your timings, the lenders should be able to work with you. I know some lenders are a little bit more relaxed, but the reality is you've still got to pay the interest. So sometimes there may be additional arrangement fees, but hopefully most people are sensible and they realize that, look, we've had problems. If you go back to COVID time, then those loans will extend, and your interest will roll up and you'll pay it at the end. But I know I had a chat with an insolvency practitioner yesterday. He's telling me, not necessarily property, but generally, there is a tsunami apparently of bankruptcies that are going to happen in Q3 this year. It's incredibly sad. But yeah, sometimes these things go wrong, which is why, personally, I'm not a big fan of you ever being massively overgeared. You need, and you raised these points, I think, last week, Richie, with the 2 examples of the developments. And I'd say you need a little bit of wriggle room. You know, I think we were looking at either a bigger development or a smaller development.
Yes.
So perhaps, you know, do it so that you can control it. Again, I'm just going back to this 100% joint venture product. The good thing with that is there's no PGs. You're not the borrower. If the deals, so I've got a client right now, we're looking at a project on the South Coast. It comes in at about 2.5 million, 27% margin on GDV before finance costs. He's got the expertise. It must have planning, which he's got. The key point there is we need to crunch all the numbers, which we'll do in the next 24, 48 hours. But that's a project whereby the lender will buy the property in a separate SPV they own. Then there's a separate joint venture agreement with you, the developer. As the developer, you just have to deliver on your promise. No PGs, no liability.
You're making it sound too easy for them. They're loving this.
Yeah, but remember, you have to be experienced. It's got to hit the 27% margin on GDV. You can't overload it with bloated costs because they'll just knock it out. But you know, that's one way to get in, i.e. to do another deal potentially. But I'm not a big fan of being massively overgeared, particularly if you need that wriggle room. And I have seen people come, you know, with projects where you go, there's no way there's enough margin in this. You know, really, if you go over a couple of months or the GDV doesn't quite come in, you know, I'd be factoring in certainly maybe chipping. Certainly, we're seeing some valuations where GDVs are being chipped maybe 5–10% by valuers. Because going back to the question I think that was raised earlier, you know, it depends.
I think hopefully it's interesting
hopefully that helps, Simon.
The 100% product is out there, and it's like anything. Okay, it sounds great. It sounds like it's a magic bullet. It's going to sort you all out. The development is not easy. We tell you this, and if you're new to this show, you might not have heard this before, but development is blooming hard work. Okay. The fact that there are people out there like Rory that can, in the right circumstances, and if you package yourself up the right way and surround yourself with the right people, you can get 100% finance. It genuinely is possible, okay? But you've got to do things in the right way. So hopefully that's interesting. Okay, let's have a look at George's question here. So George's got a question. George says, I have finance for 65% of a project at a good rate from a traditional bank. Is mezzanine funding available for another 10 or 15%?
Yes, sometimes it is possible, George. Like the answer to all these things, I hate to say it, it depends. Just depends what the project is, what the numbers are, what's your track record, what's your experience. There is another route which I alluded to a little earlier, and that is the whole concept of, well, mezz would be debt potentially, but equity. I've got a bit more research to do into looking at using equity crowdfunding. I think it's quite a clever way of being able to raise money, where go back to your capital stack. So you've got your senior lender with the main bulk of your funding. If you've got some, you have to have some skin in the game. But then can you go and raise maybe, for example, say we get 60% funding, say from the lender, 30% maybe from equity crowdfunding, and maybe 10% from you. And then perhaps with the equity crowdfunding, you're probably going to pay, you know, the expectation that you'd have if you're equity crowdfunding on the money that you're putting in. You sort of want like a 20% annualized return on your money. That's the money that they put in. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's 20% on the profit. And I was looking at a case today with one of the guys running the business that does this. It's quite an interesting way of raising money. The most important thing is it's 100% FCA compliant. This is the key thing. Running around and borrowing money from your mates, you've got to be very, very careful doing that. FCA compliancy is critical. And so if you're borrowing, even on loan notes now, that is regulated by the FCA. You need to make sure, if it's more than one person, that you're borrowing on a loan note, so they're the lender and you're the borrower. Are you borrowing from someone who's a high net worth or sophisticated investor? Have they self-certified? Have you got evidence of that? Or you could be getting into the realms of collective investments. And that's why I'm very keen to go look at this whole route of using an FCA regulated route for raising equity, because it's compliant, and that way everything's fine. Plus you can access people who've got the odd £1,000 here or £1,000 there, who are quite happy to invest in a project. I think that's a big part of the future.
Good stuff. Hopefully, George, that's answered your question. We had a quick question in from Stephen, where he says, sorry, I'm fairly new to development. Can you explain profit on GDV before finance? What does that all mean? Very quickly,
Sorry,
Stephen. I'll just do this one very quickly, then we'll go on to the next one. Ian can get the next question ready. But quickly, Stephen, when we're talking about GDV, we're talking about gross development value. That's the project value that we're going to sell for. And often you hear people talk about before or after finance. So 27% without any finance costs in the project. When you put them on, that's going to bring that percentage of profitability down. When we talk to people, we always talk about an absolute minimum, and not talking about 100% product here. We talk about a minimum of having 20% on gross development value, including finance, before you even start a project. That's basically to try and keep this thing on your back to avoid any risk at the back end. So, Stephen, hopefully that answers that. What's next, Ian?
I've got one in from Damien, who asks, at the end of a development of multi-residential units, is it worth switching from development finance to bridging finance during the sales period from a cost point of view?
It is possible. Yes. So, Damien, it is possible to, there are products now which are sort of development exit products, and it could be worth looking at that for sure. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I've got a question here from Jacqueline. Good evening, Jacqueline. I hope you're well. Kids are back at school now, Jacqueline, so you must be doing the right old dance, cheering away. Jacqueline couldn't wait to get rid of her kids at school. I think it's a terrible thing to say, but she's quite honest about it. So Jacqueline's question is, would a lender look at allowing me to borrow against a freehold I own on 2 flats as security? So basically using the freehold on a couple of flats as security. Could Jacqueline do that?
I'm assuming these are buy-to-let properties. So if they're unencumbered, yes, you could look at that for sure, as in they've got no mortgages on them. If they have mortgages, then it would depend what the gearing is, i.e. the loan to value. If it's low, it might be worth actually refinancing them on new buy-to-let mortgages to raise capital, which would probably work out a bit cheaper, because buy-to-let mortgages, what, 2.x, 3% or thereabouts. But so yes, you could do that. And just to add one further point, we're looking at some projects for clients now where they've got lots of equity in their main homes, and they want to raise money for business purposes. And so, yeah, we've got I've got a whole team that work with me, and we can look at raising second charge funding on your main home for business purposes. So if you've got a really low rate on your main mortgage and you do not want to give it up, you might have 0.5% over base. There's no way you'd like to forego that. So the second charge, that can be an attractive way, and then you're just looking at the blended cost of the first and the second charge. I don't know, you raise 150k, you've now got yourself a hunting license to go and do something in building your business. That's another way of raising.
Well, that's done. You've actually done extremely well answering Jacqueline's question, and by the same token, Harvey, I think probably Rory's answered your question as well by the looks of it. Ian, what's next?
Got one here from David, who's thinking about coming at it from the other end. He says, hi, Rory, do you work with private investors who can provide you with funds which you can then lend to developers? So do you provide solutions for investors as well?
Hello, David. Yes, I have. In the last 15 years, I have worked with investors. To be fair, a very small number who I do work with. So yeah, that's a conversation I'm always open to having. But yes.
Fantastic.
Okay. Good stuff. Michelle, you've only just joined the show. Where have you been all night? Come on, we start at 7 o'clock. And people, if you have just joined the show, and I know a few of you have joined fairly recently, they are all recorded, so you can listen to all the banter and the goings on, all on YouTube. Pop on YouTube, and you can listen to every show of Open Door to your heart's content. It'll probably keep you busy till Christmas. If you've got nothing else to do in your life, then you can listen to us day and night. Matthew's question. Hello, Matthew. Hope you're well. Matthew says, Hey, Rory, which is an interesting introduction, isn't it? Hey, Rory, when a lender looks at a new company, do they look at the director's personal credit file? Wonder why Matthew's asking that, Matthew. Or at the company's accounts? That's interesting, Matthew. Rory, so do they look at your personal credit file and the company accounts? Matthew's history's got to be pretty horrendous, I'm guessing here, but I won't mention his surname.
No, I think I know who it might be. I have no idea. The answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends on the lender. You know, if I've got projects that I've funded, and I may fund, if I've got capital, I might fund 100%. Now you'll pay because I'm going to fund. It could be 100% of the buy, could be 100% of the buy and the build. If it's a small conversion, for example. I've got one actually I'm looking at for a client right now. And he said, look, will you fund 100% of this? We go, well, let's have a look at it. But it's asset-based lending. But you do want to know who am I lending to. And so, yeah, I would always want to see a copy of your Experian credit file. You want to see it anyway as well to check that it's up to date and everything's in order. And so some lenders will ask and some won't. Again, it would just depend.
There you go, Matthew. You might get away with it. You might be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Ian, what's next?
Well, linked to that, we've got a question from Jin. And Jin asks, what information do you need to assess whether you will lend or not? What do developers need to give you?
Okay, so you would have obviously gone through the process of creating your own appraisal. And obviously, Richie and Ian, you do that with your mentees and your students. So the first thing is, you send us your appraisal. Keep it real simple. What's the purchase cost? What are all the costs associated with development? What's the GDV? Where did you get the GDV from? What's the evidence of recent sold comparables, not necessarily asking prices? How did you derive the build cost? What's the rate per square meter, or if you're a bit old-fashioned, the rate per square foot? We just need to understand. It's okay, and work all those numbers through and go, does it stack? And then go back to, I will always look at margin on GDV. So what's my profit divided by the GDV? That's got to be, if it's the 100% product, 27% before finance costs. If you're using traditional finance, you've got to be well over 20% to make it really worth your while. If you're looking at 15 to 20, that could be really tight, depending on what you're doing. Yeah, but so that's what you're doing. You most of that you would have put together. And how can I phrase this? If you don't understand that, then you're going to need to go and buddy up with someone who does, or go get some training and some education so you can take them through the whole process, and then work with somebody who goes, yeah, look, I eat and breathe this all day long. I understand exactly what we're doing. Also, has it got planning? No lender's really going to fund without planning. Sometimes you can. I'm looking at for a client now, they've got planning on the site, but they want to change it and saying, can we get some bridging on it? We're looking at that now because they think they can get better planning. That's a job I've got to work on over the next day or so. But they're the basic things that you would look at.
Fantastic. Jen, I hope that answers your question. Richie.
Right, Deb's question. Deb says, evening, Richie and Ian. But Deb, I notice you don't say good evening to Rory. Oh, you should do further down. A bit
Hello,
late
Debs.
to get on tonight, so hope this hasn't been asked already. Well, Debs, make a bit more effort and come on time. I mean, it's unbelievable. You can't believe it, Rory. They turn up late and they want to ask a question.
No, well, let's fire away.
She says, hi, Rory. I'm new to small scale development, previously buy-to-lets. I'm currently on the mentorship program with propertyCEO. Yeah, I know who you are, Debs. I know who you are. What kind of lending would I expect? Thanks. Maybe, Rory, just give a quick recap for someone that's new, because I know a few people have joined up late. Just a quick couple of headlines of how you can get 100% what you need, and then just a couple of other things of deals. I know a couple of other people have asked similar things.
Yeah, if you're absolutely brand spanking new, you've never done a development before, a couple of refurbs, don't take it the wrong way. That doesn't really cut it as development from a lender's point of view. you need to buddy up with someone who's got a real track record. They know what they're doing. They've earned their stripes. They've done it. And that's what you have to sort of be prepared to give up. So you set up a new SPV, so a new special purpose vehicle. So let's say you can do that. You've built a good team around you. What funding can you get? Nice and simple, top of the tree, 100% joint venture development funding. Total cost right now can't exceed more than 2.5 million. The margin on the GDV has to be minimum 27%. You will pay for the money that's drawn down. Those costs are akin to bridging type costs, which is typically around a 2% arrangement fee. And I'm going to say approximately 1% a month. That's a cost. Then what gets left after the whole site is sold is split 50-50. You have no skin in the game, no personal guarantees. You are not liable. So that's not a bad way if you've got a great team who've done it before and they've got a real proven track record. Moving down the line, then we're just looking at keeping it nice and simple. Traditional development finance, you've got to bring some equity to the table. And normally you'd get about, let's say, 50 to 60% of the GDV funded, all of the build in stages and in arrears, and maybe say 50% towards the purchase. So you're going to bring half the purchase price and your associated costs to get up and running and some spade ready money. And then completely separate to that, it is possible to look at raising the equity bit that you don't have from the crowd. So let's say the debt bit in your capital stack is 60%, 30% potentially comes through raising it through equity, and maybe you're bringing 10% to the table. That's another way of looking at it. So there's three sorts of examples. But again, you do need a proven track record. So you've got to buddy up with someone. Do one or two, that team. Yep.
Good stuff. Here, what have we got? Let's see if we can fit a couple more in before we run out of time.
Okay. This one's from Sybil. Evening, Sybil. Sybil, asks, what type of development is Rory lending on at present? Is it mainly conversions or is it new builds? What's the flavour of the month?
Yeah, so we do a lot of bridging finance, which is what is our core business. And then with, give you an example, the 100% product, there's about 40 live cases of that, which are essentially either major conversions or new build. Yeah. And anything in between, really. I get to look at all sorts of projects. If I'm brutally honest, there's a fair number we go, the numbers just don't stack, that's not viable. And there are others where it could be, let's have a look. I went to look at a site yesterday, nice, easy way to get going. Chap, it's in Wiltshire, buying what was a restaurant, converting it into a 2-bed cottage. Really simple. The job will be done in 12 weeks. Yeah, wow. And it's got a nice bit of profit, not millions, but it's a nice way to get going. That's that one. Got another one where a chap's just bought a property, probate, it's falling to pieces on the south coast. Another lender was going to lend. They asked 101 questions. They wanted every report possible. I went, let me look at it. I'll fund it. And so he rang me on a Friday, and well, 2 weeks have passed, and the money's gone today because it was faffing around. And it's like, let's get it done. I know you're going to knock the back of it down and add a 2-story extension anyway, so I'm fine with that. And then there's so many over the years. If we had more time, I've got so many I could share with you. There is a webinar that I've done, actually, guys, that people can go and watch if they want. All the stuff I've talked about, they could go and watch that webinar if they wanted to know more.
You want to give a shameless plug for your webinar?
Yeah, why not? So if you go to, it's very simple, go to tinyurl, so tinyurl.com, and then it's /Rory webinar. So tinyurl.com/Rory, RORY webinar, and that will take you to, you can go and watch that. It's about 19-20 minutes, and it takes you through all the case studies, the whole lot. And amazingly,
20 minutes, I couldn't sit through you for 20 minutes, Rory.
You know what? I said that to my marketing guy, and he said you'd be amazed. And actually, we've had about 900 people do it. So there you go.
Well, Rory, if you can send us that link, to our team, and we'll put that in the show notes. So if anyone that's missed that, don't worry, we'll put that in the show notes.
Absolutely, yeah, very happy to do that. Yeah, well, if you're suffering from insomnia, that's definitely the link that you want to go to.
You could do a bit of Rory's webinar and listen to a few back back editions of Open Door. I tell you, get out, you'll go out like a light. You'll sleep like a baby after that. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look. Let's see if we can do a very quick answer to this one from Gary, and then I'll finish off with one more. Gary says, because it just made me smile, Gary's comment, he says, if my net worth position is not that strong, brackets since divorce, that's what made me laugh. Sorry, Gary. Anyway, she was no good for you, Gary. I never liked her anyway. How do I best position myself to raise commercial funding when I am new to development? Quick answer on that one, Rory?
It depends. Yeah, I got to understand all the details.
You could do a bit longer than that, Rory. You could put a bit more effort in.
Okay, Gary, I'd need to know a little bit more information. That's a tough one. Listen, it always comes down to what you're trying to do. What's the deal? What does the appraisal say? Let's understand how much money you do or don't have. Is it possible to make things work? If it's something that's small and you've got loads of skills, sometimes it can be done. You'd be amazed how we can, you can raise funds. I just need to understand what's the story.
Yeah, Gary, it's all about, you've got a cracking deal, put a good team around you, speak to Rory, you've got a chance. And you like quick answers, Rory, so I know this is a yes or a no. Michelle says, and she joined late, but we're going to give her a chance.
Hi, Michelle.
She says, evening all, we got funding for our current project, which is good. Will you look at equity in a buy-to-let portfolio to see if we can release further money by second charge so we can look for another project? Yes or no?
Yes, I'd always look at it. Once I've got the stats, then we can work out what you can and can't do. Yes.
Good stuff. Okay, I think, and I apologise if we haven't got around to answering your questions. We've got through quite a lot. Give us a hands up. Give us a wave if you've actually enjoyed Rory on this evening. Give us a hands up. No, that's a shame. That's unusual. And no hands have gone up this evening. So Rory, no one's enjoyed that.
To disappoint, folks.
I can tell you, Rory, it's a pretty much unanimous hands up. So, guys, thank you for that. Rory, thank you for coming on. We will perhaps welcome you back at another time when we can find a slot. So thank you very much. So, Rory, do you want to bid farewell to people? And what's your contact details if people want to get in touch with you? Obviously on the screen, is there an email? Yeah, so email's easy. It's info@closedbridgingfinance.com. Telephone number's there. But if you go to that tinyurl.com/Rory webinar, that's where you can get nearly everything I've said tonight. That will give you a good flavour. Gents, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've answered quite a few questions, and thank you very much for inviting me along. I've really enjoyed it. It's been brilliant. Well, I wish we could say the same, Rory, but it's been passable. So no, it's been a bit of fun. We'll put all of Rory's details in the show notes on YouTube on a webinar, so you can contact him. Please reach out to Rory, watch his webinar, wake up in the morning refreshed, and then give him a bell. But you've listened to what he said. Don't ring him up and be a complete buffoon and say, oh, I don't know what this is about. Well, would you lend me 100%? Be sensible about it, and you're going to get some good support. Rory, thank you very much. We've bid our farewell to Rory, and then we're going to wrap up the end of the show. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Rory. Okay. Right, well, that's Rory. Hopefully it disappeared. He's gone. That's good. He's gone. He's off. That was quick. Yeah, that was good, wasn't it? I quite enjoyed that, actually. I thought he was going to be rubbish, but surprisingly, he was quite good. Okay. Especially after all the technology. Yeah, we had a little bit of a techie problems at the beginning of the show, guys. We always like to do a bit of news. So let's do a rapid fire, four quick news items. Ian, what have you chosen? Let's do them quick as we can. Okay, there was a black armband in the office this week when we heard that the retailer Thornton's is closing its 61 stores permanently. So unfortunately, another story of a retailer leaving the high street, not going bust. They're just going to stick to online, blaming the usual suspects of COVID and the change in retail, more opportunities for developers. And the second one linked to that is obviously we heard not long ago about Debenhams and their store closure. There's news now that a developer has submitted plans in Leicester to redevelop the former Debenhams store into 300 homes for the rental market. So they're very positive about putting homes into the city centre to basically rejuvenate it. And yeah, a very large scale development for what was a very big sort of landmark store in Leicester. What have you got, Rich? Well, I've just got this one, which is very interesting. And if we'd have done it at the top of the show, if the technology would have been fine with Rory, we could have questioned him on this. But it was in Building Magazine, and it said schemes taking longer to get off the ground as nervous funders run the rule over COVID risks. I was going to dispute that, and I was actually going to say, pose this to Rory. Are you still funding? And the answer is yes, he is. You know that. You've listened to him tonight. There's plenty of deals out there. And the second one I had, which was very interesting, this was from Property Week, and this was last Friday. And grey office space, if you don't know what grey office space is, it's not painted grey, okay? It's office space which is still under a tenancy but no longer needed. So there's a lease that still exists on the office, but the occupiers are saying, we don't need this anymore, and they're trying to put it back on the market. It doubled last year, and a big proportion of it, 77%, was sub 10,000 square foot. Nice little units that are coming on the market. Obviously, they're under a lease, so they're still liable for them, but there's a potential deal to buy sub 10,000 square foot units and turn them into residential. It's interesting, isn't it? Guys, that is pretty much it for us on today's show. We're probably okay. We've only run over a little bit. We'd like to get you away by Q2. Next week's show, because Paul comes on and was moaning like mad that he didn't have enough guests, we're going to bring a guest on next week as well. And next week, you cannot miss next week's show, because actually this year in 2021, we're going to do the open door show in seasons to give ourselves a rest and indeed give you a rest. So at the end of March, we take a month off. So we will have no shows in April.
Cheers.
Yeah, I can almost hear them. So we won't be here in April, guys. So make the most of next month. We need a bit of a rest. Come and join us next week. And on next week's show, we have our very own Jan Belden. Jan Belden works with us. She is a qualified business coach, a mentor. She is one of our coaching team that works with our professionals. I've known Jan for many, many years. She actually was my finance director and helped me build a company and sold it out for a 7-figure sum. So she's a great friend of mine. She's a great individual. She's pretty straight talking like Rory. You do not mess around with her. I can tell you that from years of working alongside her. So an interesting character. Jan's going to be on to ask your questions on anything business related in terms of company structure, setup, business planning, indeed anything. Let's throw anything at Jan. So she's on next week's show, Thursday at 7 o'clock. Please drop in the chat box if you've liked tonight's show, if you've enjoyed it. We always like to hear those comments. We put this show on for you. You don't turn up, you don't ask questions, we don't do the show. And if you don't say thank you or say you've liked it, then we get upset. And you don't want us to be upset because we're not nice and we're upset. So I think that's pretty much it. Do you want to say goodbye, Ian?
Goodbye, Ian.
Excellent. Let's have a look on the list. Who says they enjoyed it? Dan says, great content, Rory. Thanks, gents, as always. Rory's already gone, Dan. So there's no point in saying thank you to him anymore. What a waste of space he was. Mike says it was good time to buy commercial. What's that? That's not a question. Boo, says Damien. I think that's not us being around in April. Fantastic as always, says Matthew. Wonderful, guys, says Gregor. Great show. Thanks a bunch, says Yvonne. Thank you. Loved it, says Debs. Oh, that's pretty strong. Thanks, guys, says Damien. Bye, smiley face, says Michelle. Goodbye, everyone. Smiley face to you. See you next week. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.